vibe for a little bit. We good? I know I got 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. I know. Yo. Rock with us. Rock with us. Hey, yo. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of soul, and a little boom bap. It goes a little bit of this, a little bit of that. My name is Cal Levine and I'm killing this rap. It goes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of rap. It goes a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You better take this, cause my shit is fat.
All right, this is your host, Miss Dale Novella with The Rec Life. And we're on Skies Crescent Radio. This is the Poet Podcast. Yay! Thank you. We had little noisemakers before, and they've disappeared. Oh, I see it. I don't need. Well,
you see one.
We can get it later. So we have an amazing crew with us today of brown people.
Oh.
Yay! Yay!
Yes.
So I'm gonna start on my right because Baxter likes being first, but he will not be first. So on my right, we have the most beautiful John Roberson,
Yes.
who is a journalist and multimedia artist and educator and a bunch of other stuff too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And just a pleasure to be around.
Thank you. As
How
are you.
doing? Thank you. How are you doing
I
today?
am good. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me back. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to be back.
Cool. Are you working on anything interesting or fun or good?
Yeah, I would say in my professional life, things have shifted a bit. I think I was working here this time last year. I'm working on a New Eurekan Founders Archive so I'm digitizing that at my job.
Yeah.
And then creatively, working on my novel, as always. So, trying to get a little writing in every day.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Do you have any trips planned?
I will be in Mexico in June. Yeah,
Cool.
Mexico City.
Now, I know you've studied Spanish, and we talked a little bit about how, like, the different accents, different Spanish accents from around the world can get a little confusing. Which Spanish accent is your favorite Spanish accent?
Oh. I don't know if I would have a favorite. I think I'm most familiar with certain ones. I think I studied, Mexican, of course, Mexican Spanish sort of, which there are many sort of subcategories in that are most common in the United States, I would argue, ultimately. But I also studied in Argentina for a while, so that's also familiar. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And next we have Miss Chaya Babu,
Hello.
who is all things. We were just talking about some of the things that you do, but you are also a journalist and an educator and joy to be around.
Oh. A joy to be around should be my just like it's my title.
It's on your business card. Your next round of business cards will just say joy to be around.
Shia Babu, joy to be around.
That should be like the landing page for your website.
It really should.
Right?
Like writing, healing, and then joy to be around stuff.
Exactly.
So what do you have going on that's interesting or new or?
What is new? I mean, this is like old and new, I guess, because I've been toiling over this book manuscript for, some time. But I'm nearing, I think, what feels like, I mean, in the sense that I feel like there are so many ends. An end of some version of a draft, which, is, I don't know, it's like good and awful because I just have no idea what's going on. And that's really how I feel about it. Like, people are like, oh, you feel like you've been really kind of in it with the book stuff. How is that? And I'm like, that's not a question. Don't ask that question. That's almost like exclusively, not that I guess very few of us are fortunate enough to be exclusively doing something like that. Still, teaching a little bit and working on other pieces here and there, but really have been devoting my energy to kind of what I feel like is a final push for this hybrid memoir, if you will.
Cool. And you mentioned you're a healer. What kind of healing work do you do?
Well, yeah, I don't love the healer title, which we don't have to get into, but yeah. So I read tarot. And I'm a Reiki practitioner, but I feel like that's a little bit more, I haven't done as much of that for other people. Like I can and I do, but I feel like the tarot is much more of a front-facing aspect of, I guess, quote-unquote healing work, if you will, helping people come into their more conscious selves.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So there's a young man in a red sweater. He's very cute. He has nice thighs. He's a rapper. He's an educator. He is an international superstar.
This is clearly not a family program.
Thighs can be family.
No, I could have been saying chicken thighs. Like you might cook some really great chicken thighs. He is also my fiance, Mr.
Hello.
McCalamine. How are you
Hello,
doing?
how are you? I'm
I'm
good.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
you got going on?
So I'm right now. I'm in the midst of the run for my show that I produce at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, Words on Power. We had our last public show last night, was really powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah, Mayuna Youssef, aka Mumu Fresh, La Bruja from the Bronx, Timothy Dwight, and Gabriel Ramirez is this year's ensemble, hosted by Baba Israel. Super dope, and we're gonna
Just
have
insane.
yeah. it's-
I can't believe they made these pieces up in their heads. But anyway.
Yeah, it's amazing, powerful stuff. And we have our second week, which is mostly school time. Well, all school time performances. Primarily, high school students get to see these shows. Hip hop, spoken word, dance, singing. We actually did like a hip hop theater show this year. It was more like a theater show with music kind of interwoven, which is really kind of Baba's wheelhouse. So we've been kind of sort of evolving the show over the last several years that I've been a part of it, and we celebrated our 15th year. I am releasing my latest album. I'm finalizing that in May, called The Passport.
Oh,
So I've
really?
been working on that for the last 4 years since not my last international tour, but I went to Africa in 2015, and that's where it started. And I've been
I've heard you had some really interesting and amazing features on it.
quick plug. Miss Dale Novella is on several of the songs, along with some really amazing other artists as well. I'm not as amazing as you, but from Germany, Hungary, Swaziland, Mozambique. So really dope. Really excited about that. And then we have a show on Thursday
Yes.
with Jade Zubrick.
Zubrick.
Did I say that right?
Zabrick.
Zabrick. Sorry.
That's not one of the many.
sorry. Jade Zabrick, AD, and Megacypher, who's on his American Dream tour. We're supporting that, and then we are.
And we're
out-
all veterans. That's why I call it the American
Except for
Dream
me.
Tour. Except for you.
except for me.
Your pants. You're good.
Okay,
He supports us.
that's enough camo. Okay, and then in a month we're going to be heading out to Rotterdam to perform at New School Rules, which is the largest urban and hip hop conference and festival in Europe. So we're happy to do that. We're going to be supported by the one and only Chicago's finest P1 on the decks, and we were going to rock out for a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for being here as always.
Thank you for having me.
And last, and certainly least,
It's
That's cold. That's cold.
all right. I'm pretty sure Dale only wants me to go last so I can plug the poet.
Facts.
how you doing, Baxter? Baxter is an amazing host of The Poet Will Be Televised and several other organizations that are high profile.
Allegedly.
And allegedly. He is an amazing rapper and freestyler.
Also
He
allegedly.
Is a great barista and manager of baristas.
Also allegedly. All of this
And
is
he has
hearsay.
a skull and bones on his shirt.
I do.
And that's fact.
It's from an anime called One Piece. I'm Baxter Wordsworth. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome. What you got going on?
You've already mentioned everything. We've started the new season of End of the Week, EOW, the longest running, formerly weekly, possibly monthly hip hop showcase open mic in New York City, possibly the world. Just announced that the world finals is going to be in Belgium, which I'm excited about.
Ooh, Belgium?
Yeah,
I think we should go.
I'm
Waffles,
I'm
McAllen.
excited about it on one hand. On the other hand, I'm all Europe'd out. I've been to Europe for like the last 3 years, and I kind of want to go to a different continent. So I don't know if I'm going to go to Belgium.
And y'all are in other parts of the world.
Yeah, we just opened up a chapter in China. I just got added on Instagram by EOW Italia, so I think there might be something going on in Italy. We've got a couple of chapters in Africa, Madagascar, South Africa, Uganda, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, and we've since reformatted our New York show et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of things going on with that. Just had a show last Sunday. Next show is April 27th. Also, I host a little-known program by the name of The Poet Will Be Televised.
What is The Poet Will Be Televised?
It is a poetry, music, jam session, open mic, extravaganza, soiree, promenade. It's coming up this Wednesday, April 10th, at lovely Sylvana's, which is 125th, 125, 116th Street. Right. I know that's mad confusing. It's in Harlem. It's 125 in Harlem, but it's not on 125th Street. It's on 116th Street. I didn't mean to do that. But yeah. That's what I'm doing.
Are you dropping any music?
I'm writing.
Good.
I'm writing music. Am I dropping it? No, because then it would break. No. I'm creating. I'm in the middle of creating things. Several things.
Very good. High five. Thank you for being here. So
none of these sounds are useful, by the way.
We'll figure it out. But the next sound is very useful. It's Rabbi Darkside.
Oh, what? No,
with
no,
the
no,
big...
no.
Oh, yeah. I have. Mikhail's going to introduce.
Well,
me.
there's someone we forgot. Entrepreneur.
You're right. You're
Soul
absolutely
singer
right.
Extraordinaire.
To my right.
To our right.
The always right.
Can I get my intro in? Y'all interrupted my intro. So, entrepreneur, soul singer extraordinaire.
What else?
Master teacher.
Oh yeah.
Lover of all things fish and grits.
Which is fish and grits.
Which is fish and grits.
Or fish and cheese grits.
Or fish. See. There's levels to this. The world-renowned cat whisperer. You know her as Dale Novella Anderson. How are you doing? What's going on with you? Where did you just come back from?
I just came back from Carnegie Hall.
No. That's New York.
That was amazing. I wanted to hear the rest of that.
I literally just came back from Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, okay.
Recording and helping babies have their first on-stage experience.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, at a poetry.
That's really cute.
It's kind of like a poetry festival during their Family Day event. A couple weeks ago, I did go to South by Southwest with Jade Zabrick and the label Noir, and we had a few shows. Jade was playing all over the place. She was like rock star. And what did I do? I'm so tired.
You got tired just thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh.
You just filmed for
do
Tiny
so
Desk.
much.
You just filmed for Tiny
Yeah,
Desk.
I just filmed my submission for Tiny Desk, which is my first time applying for it. So I'm excited about that.
Is there like a regulation for how big the desk can be? If the desk is
I
too...
don't think so. Their desk in
There's
the
a medium
is
desk.
kinda
There's
big.
medium desk. There's small medium. There's schmedium desk.
Like if the desk is too big, do they send it
Yeah.
back like, sorry?
Aren't you also working on a covers album? You've been mixing a covers album.
I am mixing a covers album. I have been working on it for a while, and I'm gonna start. I have all the vocals done, and I just need to get it like a better mix of it because I always do light mixes. And then after that, I'll start re-recording. I'll re-record Black Girl Magic because I love it, but I want to change some things. And then I'll do Harlem, which seems to be crowd favorite. And then I'll do Here I Am and a couple other songs, and eventually I'll release them. Hopefully before the end of the year.
Cool.
But not before Where the Love Is, which is my single with Mikhail, comes out.
Yes.
Yeah. So now, Rabbi Darkside.
Superman.
manifest. Turn it to the new turn it 6 between 13 years old. Turn it to better song, better song. The lines are gone, so you better get on. The rest of all, the better man, but I'm leaving it to better song. Better song, better song. The lines are gone, you better get on one side of the other. The rebels are gone, watch you walking out on the base one time.
All right, so that was Rabbi Darkside with the bigger bomb or the better bomb, something like that. And in the song, he talks a lot about how in politics, in society, everything's changing and it's kind of not really changing for good or better. It's just like various degrees of like weird or bad. At least that's the first verse. And I was thinking we're starting to get into election season, at least for the presidency, and there are all these people that are coming out. They're trying to run for president on the Democratic ticket. What do we need to see change so that we can, I would say, just get rid of Trump? That's like the small problem. But
That's a big problem.
I mean, it's a big problem, but I
No,
feel
but
like it's
yeah.
the smallest problem
It's
of all
not
the
the-
problems we have.
I know what you mean, but
Yeah.
calling it small just feels wrong. It's a huge problem, but it's not the only problem.
Yeah, but how do we do that?
I mean, there's a lot of problems. First of all, we need more than two parties, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But going back to Trump, how do we get rid of Trump? What needs to change to get rid of Trump?
I think the complexity of all this that a lot of people aren't talking about is the fact that even though it's not necessarily true, the perception is that the economy is stable. I think that's the one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. The reason why Trump is tolerable is because Wall Street, for the most part, is not tanking. So it's a matter of, can the American people realize that effectively their wallet is actually not better off than it was 4 years ago? I think that's the larger driving point. I don't really believe in the morals of our country, so I don't think all of the things that Trump has said or things with the wall or things with the border are going to really change people's minds. I think what a lot of Americans, working Americans and Americans that rely on things like health care and other services, what they really will vote towards or vote against or be active on is their finances. And right now, for the most part, there's enough people that are not. There's definitely people that are suffering for sure, but it's not to the extremes of. Put it like this: George Bush was effectively with the reason why, a big reason why President Obama won was because when we had the fallout with the housing crisis, he promised a complete overhaul and a revamping of our financial system. We can debate whether or not that actually happened. But the fact that people were so willing to see something new in terms of the party was due to the fact that that was not hung on Bush, it was hung on the Republicans. So financially speaking, Americans are more likely to act or react based on that. And the big thing right now is like, for the most part, for enough Americans, it's relatively stable. But someone has to make someone has to make the connection that ultimately it's kind of fool's gold. But I think that's what has to actually change the awareness of
Their
that.
mindset has to change.
I think
Yeah.
people need to see evidence too. To Mikhail's point, and I think we're in tax season now, and I think that even Trump's new tax regulations, people are going to be feeling that. If not this year, then definitely next year.
Right.
So, there's a little bit more money in your paycheck now, and then come tax time, you actually get fewer deductions, you get fewer everything. Like you end up getting, if you are anticipating a refund, it's smaller to non-existent,
Right.
and if you already have to pay taxes, like it becomes that much more of a burden,
Right.
So I think, right, it might seem stable, and then, people are kind of looking at the short term, and it continues to gut any sort of safety net that, our generation is going to need later on for retirement, for whatever.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that a lot of people are feeling it, but the people who are benefiting the most from it are going to be wealthy people who will then, of course, vote, in their interest to keep their money,
Where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think wealthy people are, who might otherwise have, or at least tell themselves that they otherwise have progressive ideals,
Right.
are feeling him because it's good for their pockets.
Yeah.
So, changing people's mindsets as far as what would need to shift in their mindset specifically? Is it just the general morals of American life that is making them support this president a little bit more?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of I feel like this is one of those social media quotes that's been going around, but AOC kind of talking about how, Trump is just the symptom. In terms of changing people's minds, it's you look at a country where our foundations are these systems of oppression. And so even the people who aren't necessarily kind of the ones who have come out of the woodwork, burning churches and stuff, burning black churches, the question of changing people's minds toward,
I also think too, to that point, I think there's another way to look at it too. Right now, the biggest front runners are Beto, Sanders, Kamala. Am I saying it right? Kamala? Is it
Yeah.
Kamala? So I think. Say it again.
No.
Oh,
Zabrid.
I think it's not. I think it's not so much about changing the mentality around Trump. I think Trump is a pretty not likable figure. I think it's more to the point of what's going to be an alternative that's going to be solid enough and strong enough in the ideas and the attitude and the energy. I mean, the one thing that we can say about President Obama and Michelle was they had a galvanizing way of bringing either people together or really crystallizing a vision that people could get behind. And it's really not about it's not so much about changing your mind about Trump. It's about we need something that looks significantly better and significantly more dynamic than what he's offering. And right now, and it's really early, no one's really offering anything that looks marketably there's a lot of ideas kind of being talked about in a very large general way, but no one's getting to look, this is how this is going to be significantly better than this.
That's because
Go ahead.
No.
Well, that's because a lot of decisions are made around the cult of personality nowadays instead of actual facts or numbers. I don't think a lot of the stuff that you were talking about I think is extremely relevant, and I think there are educated and mindful people who pay attention to that sort of thing, but I don't think that's what sways people to follow or support someone like Trump. I don't think people are I think the people who vehemently support him aren't supporting him because of his policies or his ideals. I think he's just he's a master entertainer, and he has a bombastic personality. Whether you think it's a good personality or a bad personality, he gets the attention in the room.
Is he also Mr. Fantastic?
Well, but
No,
but we also gotta
he's not a
remember,
Mr.
too,
Lover
but
either.
He didn't have an overwhelming majority, so it's not about necessarily changing people over from
I
Trump.
mean-
There's a lot of people that just didn't get involved.
But to your point about, rallying people behind a message that they feel represents them and that they can relate to, that is what he did. You
Yeah.
know?
That's
Yeah.
Right.
what he did.
That's not our message, of course, or anything that, makes me feel remotely safe as a black woman in this world, but I think that is what he has done with a very specific segment of the population, and they're like a non-fact base. To your point, very much caught up in the cult of personality and in sort of a throwback to an America that never was, or certainly one that most of them are too young to have ever experienced, and that was, devoid of people of color, devoid of queer people, non-Christian.
Right.
It's not
straight, cis, heterosexual, white president was like what his biggest running thing. And like for someone, he was like the perfect antithesis to like a Hillary Clinton or anybody who wasn't like a straight white male. Like, he was like the super uber straight white male. Like the one just completely convinced this is his own superiority.
Self-made.
Right.
Filled with toxic masculinity and like the old cowboy trope that Americans love.
And part of that too, to the economic point though, is the fallacy of him being a self-made person also gives poor white people
The
something
delusion.
to aspire to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like that is why poor white people are so often ready to vote against their best interests
Mm-hmm.
because they believe that in that promise of America for white people.
Yeah, they're just temporarily humbled millionaires. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I'm just down on my luck.
But also that it raises another question because like are we trying to beat Trump or are we trying to like fix society and the system?
I would like to fix our society and our system, but the narrative, many people think as soon as Trump gets out of office, everything will be great,
right,
and
but-
it's like that's not.
But
that's the point I was trying to make. It's not about that.
But
It's about
what I wanted to say is, so like we find ourselves in this interesting kind of like lose-lose situation, right? Where we're looking for the best option to beat what this person that we like view as the enemy, right? But the best option to beat the enemy might not be the best option to fix the situation,
Right.
or because
Sorry.
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
I feel like we're just looking for, kind of to your point, the best option to rally around. Like we're looking at who the Democrats are like thinking about, and we're like, oh, this person is the best option to rally around, it might not be the best person to like fix what needs to be fixed. It's just like, oh, this person is likely to beat Trump. That's why people are looking at Sanders as like, you couldn't beat Hillary in the primary, and you're like very, very old at this point. So it's like you're probably not going to beat Trump. Not like your policies.
Aren't him and Trump like the same age? They're almost the same age.
Well, they definitely don't look it.
They don't. They don't.
Sorry, Bernard.
He's been eating too many bacon, egg, and cheeses.
too many New York bagels.
Yeah. Jai, what was the
I'm
point
just
you wanna say?
thinking about this question of fixing. Like I'm thinking about, even people who are anti-Trump. There are so many divisions around the question of what needs to be fixed versus, and I know I'm speaking a particular language here, versus like what needs to be like burned the fuck down,
Right.
which like isn't something that even has anything to do with electoral politics really. And then this question of, I forget how you put it, just like Trump versus X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Right. So when it was like Trump versus Hillary, right? I don't know if we all remember that there were a lot of people who were like, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
Like ultimately,
Right. Like
for the
Hillary
most
and Trump are
vulnerable,
the same
they
people.
really mean the same
Right.
thing. And
People
then,
on the left saying that. Yeah.
right, people on the left. I'll admit that I had those moments too. I mean, I wasn't going to sit out the election. I didn't feel that strongly about the fact that I thought they were the same because they're not. And then, as soon as he comes into office, we like see the hell that, started to emerge, and there were, reasonably righteous voices being like, seriously, for those of you who sat out the election because you just thought it wasn't worth voting because both options sucked, like, look at where we are. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but just that it does make a difference, and yet that still doesn't touch the question of like fixing versus what needs to
Right.
just be totally destroyed in order to be rebirthed. And I don't know how. I
Can
don't
there
know how we
be
do that.
destruction and rebirth without like bloody revolution?
Yeah, I think there can be like a lot of, but like
I could do bloody revolution.
I could too.
I'm not mad at that either.
a lot of, but I think I think a lot of the problem is a failure to even acknowledge that the system is broken. Like, you know, like
Well, that's the question. Like, are we? Like,
Is it,
how do
though?
we fix?
yes, 1,000
people
times
it
yes,
was
a
designed
million
to-
times
But I'm
yes.
saying my point
I
is
think
that
that's-
I think it's
that-
doing what
I-
it's meant to do.
I was gonna say,
doing what it's
Yeah,
meant to do.
the
Oh, I get what you're
system's
saying.
not
But-
broken.
that's
It's
semantics. That's-
doing
it's
what it
semantics.
But
meant
no,
to
but
do.
I don't think it is. So, like, you know, whatever you want to feel about the founding fathers, and they definitely were like some scummy people.
They
like
just want to keep fucking their slaves.
no, the ideals, at least the ideals that this country was founded on were like righteous. Like the
For white
the
But they were
no,
lies.
No.
Some
The
of them were just
the
straight up
ideals. Listen, if you go back and you read like the Federalist Papers and things like that, like they knew the hypocrisy that they were getting into when they wrote like all men are created equal. Like they knew that they weren't just saying white men, but they also knew that that's not the system that they were entering into.
Well, they wrote.
No, but they
"Accept
said all men
black
are
people
created
first."
equal.
No.
And then they erased it.
And then they
like,
had
you
the
can
New Jersey
look at it.
Compromise.
You could
Yeah.
So
With the
They
assumption
No,
that
no.
certain bodies were not.
They they definitely
Yeah.
compromised because they were trying to avoid the war that eventually came, you know, years and years later. But it's like, yo, the idea, the country was built on righteous ideals. Like, you know, like people are supposed to be equal. You should have the right to a pursuit of happiness and things like that. Whether they ever facilitated that for all people is a no. Like, you know what I'm saying? That the country's never lived up to the ideals that it's created.
I think at one point I believe what you're saying, and I think for me that the issue with it is because I hear you. They've actually created a document where you could essentially check individuals on that righteousness, right? Like if you go by the letter of the law or you go by the letter of the document, but what I would say what trumps that ultimately is the character of.
I mean,
while they wrote that document,
not him, everybody. Oh,
Well,
What trumps
hold
that?
on, hold
As
on.
in, like the word trumps
Right.
the verb.
Well,
That's what. Yeah.
oh, which trumps that? Got you.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't say where Trump's at. I was like,
No wordplay. No
Not just
wordplay.
him.
I know we rap, but no wordplay. No, what I'm saying is essentially because I'm very close to what you're talking about, like dismantling all of this stuff, starting over, erasing it, whatever we got to do. And I honestly, my personal philosophy and belief is that we actually can have a revolution without blood. We just have to walk away. We have to, en masse, as a group, just simply walk
But
away
nah.
from.
We're not going to. Most of
the
us aren't
South
gonna
tried to
do
walk
that.
away.
Wait. The South
Well,
didn't.
the white people in the South, and if the black people in the South had actually had rights back
but
then,
the South
they
didn't-
wouldn't have gone
hold on,
anywhere.
hold on. The South didn't try to necessarily walk away. They wanted to essentially take over. So they didn't have that. They didn't have the
No, but see, in the earlier part of the country, the sovereignty belonged to the states. So the states were supposed to be like little countries that were protected by like the federal government.
Right.
So the South should, if they felt like the federal government wasn't really in their best interest anymore, should have been able to create their own sovereign government, right? But like any loss of power will always be taken as nobody gives up power willingly. No loss of power is ever taken like casually. So of course.
Right.
Like the Lincoln who had just became president isn't going to let half the country leave because they lost like, you know, what they wanted to happen. But that's a whole other thing. But my point is like, just look at it like this. If you walked into a courtroom and a courtroom worked the way it was supposed to work, we'd have no complaints, right? The laws, the way they're set up, should protect the innocent and punish the guilty.
Right.
But
Well,
the problem is
okay.
that the human aspects of that skew everything, right? You have judges who are selling kids into the prison industrial complex. You got people making money off of people getting sent away for prison, and like all of this skews what the ideals of the system. Like people who break the law should face a reasonable punishment for it.
I agree with everything you're saying. I think the point that I was simply trying to make is that even with the letter of these documents being what they are, the reality of it is that there was an underlying system that we've talked about numerous times, all the time, is that white supremacy ultimately is the law of the land.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that is basically informed by essentially white, cis males.
And that's what needs to get burnt down.
But what you don't realize, well, I don't want to say you don't realize, but what I see those things as synonymous. I see those documents as synonymous with that because that's who wrote it, and they created that a design so that no matter what happened, we're almost 400 years into a country with a revolution, with actually really two revolutions, because if you really consider it, the civil rights movement was a revolution.
It's an ongoing revolution.
It's an
The
ongoing-
civil rights movement started in 1619 and is
Right.
still going.
Right. But you know, in essence, you have a system that is informed by sort of a shadow system, and that is actually what kind of dictates what we're doing.
If you
That's
took
what
no,
Yeah.
you-
I just this is like my witchy self, like thinking about what it means to burn something down, and it's like, can you burn down the haunted house? Like it's like the country needs a spiritual reckoning. Like, burn it down, and you can't burn down white supremacy. It's like it's the shadow.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. There are material manifestations, but it's like
You
on
can't
a
really
global level.
exercise it for
This is
real.
also like so many people buy into white supremacy, believe it. They
Because they're-
believe it.
without even realizing.
Well,
it.
they're
And that's
indoctrinated
another
into it.
problem. Yeah.
like it's not even that they believe it. It's like this.
We pray to it.
It's all they ever knew,
Yeah.
right? But it's like you were praying to it before you knew what praying was.
Right, yeah.
Like you know
That's
what I'm saying?
it is.
You know what? You know what would be very interesting related as a side note. So we had President Obama for 8 years, right? And then we went right back to a white male. What's going to be very interesting and very telling about what's going to happen politically is who's going to be the next leader of our country. This will be indicative for me in terms of like what white supremacy really is. For me,
But not really.
But no, to me, President Obama was a glitch in the matrix. It was an
I
anomaly.
don't think it was a glitch in the matrix.
I don't think so
Listen,
either.
I
Yeah.
think
No.
I hope.
I think we're heading.
I
I want
hope
to hear more
not.
about the glitch in the matrix versus the non-glitch.
Well, I
Well,
hope.
you know,
I,
this,
well,
this conversation is making me really sad, but I don't want to talk about my sadness. I'm going to let Nicole Quindo talk about her sadness
Nice
in Wake Up
segue.
Call.
I was
yeah. She's the master of the segue. So we're offline real quick. So what I
This one's called Wake Up Call. Cannabis smoke taking trips in and out of my soul. Gunmetal running down my cheek, leaving tears froze. Painkillers on the counter sitting right next to my time clock. Patiently waiting on the next hour while my mind is on lockup. You see, only a few would understand where I'm coming from. Demons dripping out of my nose like loose mucus. Knife wounds from my chest to my stomach, feeling gross, leaving me useless. But nobody knows about this pain I hide inside, so even when I cry, you won't hear me. Depression only seems to sink in when I'm standing on top of the world, do you feel me? So I light up the next blunt on the hunt for higher thoughts, praying for deeper blessings with this fake diamond cross I just bought. Dear God, do you hear me? Looking for answers because I'm lost on the ground with a crooked smile that at night turns to a frown. I'm down, lift me up, give my soul peace. I'm just trying to be found with my crown in the rust of Jesus' peace. And like the rain, my tears leave me soaked, broken, searching for hope. Bright lights flash, I'm climbing heaven's rope. Gun smoke in my mind, but this time a blast of time rewinds to my better days. Wake up to morning haze, I'm awoken by heaven's blaze. Back to my hero ways, no more tears, only souls to save. Call me the hope dealer, here to save the day. And even with minimum wage, I give my all like it's my last day to live. Finally found, but still searching. No more hopeless daydreaming, my mind just boasting. Two-stepping in a fresh pair of white Timbs that I'm just trying to live. And since this world is so dark, my heart I'm willing to put in. Call me Chef Mother. I'm jazzing the world with the different seasons I'm cooking in. Even when I fall, I spring back up. My winter heart warms up with summer love. No more wishing that my life would just end. I'm bringing back hope. I'm only looking ahead. Wake up call. Thank you.
So that was Nicole Quindo, the poetic lifter. If you follow her on Instagram with Wake Up Call, and she's talking a little bit about mental health and her own struggles, getting through that shit, as many of us have. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I saw this last night at the show at BAM at World Sound Power, and we were the artists were talking about getting through their mental health and how they like kind of keep the faith. And one of the artists was very honest and was like, he doesn't. Like, it's just like he just takes it one day at a time, and he's like, I have faith in the things around me, but not necessarily in myself. But like, how are we in times that may not be the best? How are we keeping the faith or keeping hope?
it's kind of funny because I actually related more to Gabe's point. I kind of definitely relate to Gabe where I have more.
Yes, it was Gabriel Ramirez who made that comment.
Yeah, I have more belief in the young people I serve and exceptional people more so than myself, to be honest. Like I feel like I'm trying to facilitate those things. So I definitely related to that. To be honest with you, when he said that, his whole piece that he did, and I don't want to get into it because we should be kind of reflecting on Cole's piece, but yeah, I don't know if I have like that hope, and it's weird because as I've gotten older, I'm fighting that. I'm fighting trying to be hopeful about me or things, but the older I get, I see the same things happening over and over repeatedly. I don't see these shifts that I know people have worked towards. I know that I've worked toward. I don't see these shifts. I'm seeing more of the same things, and I'm losing a lot of faith in this sort of like gradual of hey, it's going to be years or decades or whatever, because there are literally people in the immediate that I'm not someone who's like working in a place where like I'm not privy to people's lives being dramatically affected by what's going on. So it's hard for me to continue to hear like, oh, it's going to be better in a generation. It's like, well, what about the generation now? What about the people hurting and dying now? And that includes myself. That includes myself. That includes, I think, all of us around this table. So it's hard for me to kind of like feel hopeful. Just feel like I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to get to that next day.
I believe in a healthy amount of delusion.
It's real talk.
Yeah, because it's like, again, maybe it's partly semantics, but I don't know if hope is even the right framework. Like, I've been thinking a lot about people doing work around like Black futurism and this idea of thinking of the future not necessarily in terms of linear time, as in past, present, future, but as in like mess and spiral and illogics, and a future that is not based in time at all, like a future that's now, because it's exactly what you said. What about people dying now, people whose lives are in peril every moment, every day now? What does it look like to project a future as in a possibility, to leap into the dream that those lives are worthy now? And I don't know what that looks like. It's just something I've been thinking about. When we ask this question of hope or faith, faith by design is not based in material reality. It's about projecting ourselves into, I think, an otherworldly space. And I just feel like, at least for me, that feels really necessary to, I don't even want to say survive, because surviving isn't the goal, right? I think. To me, surviving is not the goal. It's living and being free. And how can we experience freedom, liberation, in this system? I don't think we can. I think we have to suspend reality at times.
And I think in that suspended space, like, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that what can also happen there is the sort of dream work that needs to happen around new systems, because increasingly, too, I think one thing that is helping me through a lot of personal political shit is, like, taking the burden off of myself as an individual. I think that's also a sort of, colonial hangover is what I call a lot of these things that sort of, end up terrorizing us in our daily lives, thinking like it's a particularly American construction of the power of the individual, when it's like, actually there needs to be systemic support. Like, what culture, what entity on this planet has ever made it without the support of a community? Like, I think that there are plenty of other systems of reliance and of healing, and we already have that model in so many ways, but I think that there are more holistic ways that are ultimately more sustainable than the current sort of things that are operated. And I think the state should have things in place. Like, a lot of what we're experiencing is a direct result of colonialism too, and so there ought to be. So I think part of reparations is also a deep investment in healing for for all afflicted populations rather.
I also just want to go back to give credit where credit is due. When I said mess, spiral, and illogics, I was quoting directly Don Lundy Martin. It's not my words.
God, she's so dope.
Yeah. I've been like obsessed with this one lecture.
Yeah. Dope.
Say the name again, because I actually want to check this out.
Don Lundy Martin.
Don Lundy Martin?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Once I go into like one thing, I can just stay there and pick it apart for like a year. So
Well, it's
where I've been.
similar to what Adrienne Marie Brown talks about with
Yes.
mycelium, you know, and it's like the way that plants will be connected under the ground. And it
Yes.
was like the example that she cited was the trees in New Orleans post Katrina that were still standing because their roots had all interconnected under the ground. And it's like,
I love that.
I was just like, oh my, like mind blown. Emergent strategies. It's early on in the book, where she talks about mycelium as an example in nature, which I think is part of the spiral and the mess and all of those things. A lot of these patterns and models are in nature, are like in like plant logic and like so many other places of how we can create these supports and also structure ourselves in a way that's not a linear time frame, you know, but
And I like that because also it's like taking the idea of the mess and the illogic and the nonlinear time and all of the stuff that feels appropriate to place outside of in an ungrounded realm. And when I think of the plants and the root system, it just brings it back to the earth and the ground. Yeah.
I had a thought, and I can't remember what that thought is. Baxter, you've been quiet.
Oh, I was just listening.
Okay.
But personally, I just try to keep two things. One, try not to be hard on myself, or to be kind to myself, right? Because oftentimes when you come up shorter than you think you should, like you especially if you're being real with yourself, you acknowledge that, like, damn, I'm not where I should be, or I'm not doing the thing that I should be, or I'm not like being as effective as I could be. But acknowledging it and being real with yourself is not the same thing as beating yourself up. You know what I'm saying? Because that'll stop you from being as productive as you could be in that moment. And also try to focus on the step and not the staircase, you know? Because, like, we all see staircases, like these huge problems that we want to tackle, these huge things that we want to, like, fix in the world. And sometimes that can be a daunting task to the point of, like, inaction. It's like, how could I ever solve world hunger, right? But you could definitely feed people. You can definitely feed one person. You can definitely, like, make sure at least one person is okay. And that's, like, the first step, right, you know? Because solving world hunger isn't like a magic finger snap. It's like actually feeding people, and that's a more actual thing that you can do. You know, even like, you know, the Trump thing. It's like you can't beat Trump, but you could, like, change someone's mind. You can educate somebody on something that maybe they didn't know about before, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, steps instead of the staircase.
Yeah.
I would agree, yeah.
You can also celebrate yourself, and I'm going to celebrate myself by playing one of my videos.
Hey.
This is Dale Novella and Baxter Wordsworth.
What? I'm on this.
Like your smile.
Stop it, shock it out the socket. It was like you make it look small as microscopic. You be like Cyclops blasting out your optics. Damn, always hit it with that hot shit. Even when it isn't, you make it like it's not it. Nah, it's like Britney Spears when they toxic. Okay, Dale, go ahead and rock it.
So that was me, Dale Novella, with, it was really a freestyle with a hook I've been working on at The Poet Will Be Televised, which once again is this coming Wednesday. And it's kind of a freestyle about love, about being in love, about celebrating that love. And I was wondering, what love do you celebrate and how? Does anyone celebrate their love?
No love. just kidding.
Self-love? Familiar love?
That must have been from February.
I've been thinking a lot about just small moments of joy. Love as a like state of being. Also relational in the sense that like all of this is relational. It's caring for others, but again, like amidst this world we live in, yes, of course we can have big moments of joy and celebration, but what are like on the day to day? For me, I try to just be, I don't know, like I remember there was this day, like, I guess it was around this time last year, and I was walking to the train or whatever, and there was a tree in my neighborhood. My neighborhood, you know, is often like covered in trash, and it's just not, it's definitely gentrifying, and there are things that come along with that, but there are a lot of aspects of it that still feel kind of, yeah, like just the garbage, and I don't feel like it's an area that the city is necessarily taking care of. And I'm walking to the train, and there was this enormous tree just like in full blossom, just like pink and white, and I stood under it, and I really felt like I had like a divine moment, you know, in my 5-minute walk to the train. And it's super cheesy, but I feel like for me that's kind of where I find love. It's just like it has to happen on the day to day, and unfortunately we all work so hard. It's New York City. I don't know about all of you, but like I have entire swaths of time, and maybe this is just the writing life, where I don't see other people. My love can't be fully relational. It is. I feel it in the energy of the collective broadly, kind of again like mimicking this idea of the root system beneath the ground. I feel it all the time, and in that sense it's inherently relational. But for myself, like when I think about leaning into love, it is these smaller moments where we give ourselves permission to lean into that state of being or feeling, I guess. Was that so terribly cheesy? I'm sorry.
No.
Everyone's like,
Not at all.
I think sometimes when I bring up love specifically, it automatically, like in people's head, it kind of turns into romantic love, and it's kind of like I think it's like a stop sign sometimes when people talk about love specifically. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing like a different kind
The
of
flowers.
love. Yes, the flowers, and just joy, and just love in relation to joy, and being a state of being.
I think, but what you're talking about too, Chaya, is really challenging, because I'm thinking, so last year I was a fellow in this public performance art fellowship, and the focus was joy. It was radical joy. And so much of what we were doing was creating joy rituals and trying to live joyous lives or joy-filled lives every day, which is really, really difficult when you were talking about the expansion and the contraction that always follows. It's like that happens on a micro level up to the macro. And so it's like you have these moments of like radical openness and vulnerability in front of yourself, in front of another person. Then it's like, oh God. And then, you know, like my immediate retreat is like, all right, like let me like turn on some Netflix, or like, you know, like go have a drink or something, or like, you know, I'm just gonna go like turn it off like after, I don't know, like a radical
it's like
workshop.
too much.
It can just be too much. And so it's like, okay, let's bring this all the way down. Law and Order, you know, something like binge watch something really
something with the
mindless.
Wayans brothers.
Yeah, right. Something that's just going to take me all the way off. And so I think what I celebrate most in love, however that shows up, is consistency, because it makes it's a call to accountability and to just like showing up for it and being present every day, which is really challenging, I think, for all of us, for self-love, you know, familial love, platonic, romantic, you know, love of like the other, and just trying to be present as much as I can in some way every day. Yeah.
I like that with the consistency, consistently showing up
Yeah.
to all of it, the
And
self,
just
and the
staying
collective.
expanded, like trying to stay expanded takes so much energy and work, but I'm working on getting there. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Interesting.
Gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because everything that you were saying, Shia, and you were saying, Jahan, you kind of just said everything. In particular, what you were saying, Jahan, for me personally, because like I definitely am in a period of like severe contraction. Like I personally do just not have the energy to deal with a lot of things right now, and I'm like I'm done. And it's tough because I don't want to be in that space.
Yeah.
But like I just don't have the energy to do it, and it's tough because love is consistent, and it's difficult to put yourself out there, and not only just to give but to receive as well. But obviously it's necessary, and you have to find the things that are going to replenish you, and I think that's kind of where I'm at, trying to figure out how to replenish. So, yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that answered the question, actually.
What's the question again? specifically?
How do you
What is
celebrate
love?
your love?
How do you celebrate?
Yeah.
How do you celebrate your
I mean,
love?
I try to
Whatever love means to you.
I try to remember that, I have these amazing things in my life, and that there's certain aspects of what I see every day in young people that I work with, or being with you, or
With
something
me.
that I've written. Well, it just, the things, obviously, like the things when we're talking about celebrating love, it doesn't have to be romantic like you were saying, but it also is like, what are the things that you pour yourself into? What are the things that you sacrifice for? What are the things that you commit to? And that means beyond just yourself. I mean, at least that's how I understand love to be. But that's a tremendous amount of energy that has to be generated on a regular basis.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just am thinking about when you said putting commitment together with this question of joy, and I'm thinking about Marie Kondo and sparking joy, and how when she clarified and she like finally came down on everyone, was like, shut the fuck up, it's not actually joy, you're like translating this incorrectly, it's about I think, I forget how she put it, but what I remember is that it's something about aliveness. It's like joy doesn't have to be happy joy. What she was speaking to was like the energy of the life force is how I think of it. So like what makes you feel compelled to commit to something, to be consistent and show up. And I was thinking of it also when you said that you feel like right now it's difficult to be expanded or be there for yourself. Like how can we show up for whether it's ourselves or our collectives or our communities in the same way? I mean, I don't know. Is anyone here a parent? I'm not. But like I think
not yet.
Okay, I think about
Not
like
yet.
how you would show up for your child even in the difficult moments. Like you're still going to be there even if it's hard. And so it's like nearly impossible to be in the state of expansion 100% of the time. And I too am in, I think, a state of what feels like consistent contraction over a long period of time. And it's like, how can we stay committed to ourselves in those moments?
Yeah. I think to that end, like, I think, like most, like, I think the distinction between happiness and joy is an important one, right? Like in the way that like is lighter than love. Like I think happiness is fleeting in a way, but joy strikes me as a choice. And I think I definitely have been, I think the best word maybe is like divesting from a lot of things because I'm dealing with an enormous amount of family health issues of, like all sorts of things, but that's probably the most pressing right now and has been for the last year. And I also have to remind myself frequently that like I have to choose myself before I choose anything else, and that is hard in moments where I feel called upon or pulled in sort of the way of taking care of other people. But I think that too is part of it, like I don't know I don't know that I feel particularly expanded in some ways I do, I guess, but like I think that reminding myself that I am still like I have to be my number one because I can't even, like, if I'm depleted, there's nothing to give to anyone else even. Right. I think that it matters beyond that logic in, like, a hopefully, like, healthy type of selfishness, type way. But like, I think that feels expansive too, just to be like, I can not have to, that doesn't have to be for everyone else. Like that can just be for self. And that is good too. And that is important work right now.
Yes.
And always,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Word.
So right now, we're going to get into our last video of the day from Baxter Wordsworth.
Me
This
again.
is, I
Jeez
forget
Louise.
what, I think I just made up a name for this one, Baxter. It's your poem that you did, or your a cappella piece that you did at the last Poet Will Be Televised.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that.
I'm gonna start from the top. You might have missed that. Sunny day. Runny like a sunny side egg, my stomach ache, baby, maybe it be something I ate. Open your eyes up. Friction from butterfly wings bursting the flames. A bunch of fireflies live in my gut. Liars lie, well, liars lie, but I wish them well, wishing to that well and dried up. Counting chickens in their egg baskets, praying them eggs hatching. How foul is this revenge that you exacting? I'm surface scratching, they hurt attacking. Petty as purse snatching, burning avatars, casting cursed magic. Stick to my rituals. Rich without residuals, I spit like a kid with a lisp and a missing tooth. My spirit animal is Tracy Chapman's fast car. I'm Yu-Gi-Oh! Trapped in a trap house pulling trap cards. This crowd's clueless like virgins who can't drive. And I apologize, I know that's harsh, just I'm so used to being misunderstood, I can't trust that I get understood. So I've stuck to my guns like gum when it sticks to your foot. I'm just a gumshoe who knew some shit's underfoot. If I can just compile my evidence, that'll be my best defense. My best of friends will love me again. Well, if they ever did, you shouldn't have to ask a person who knows right from wrong what side they're on. Fuck it. Moving right along. Hey, I admit today I made big mistakes, allowed lies to live, and thus given weight. And once you add velocity to the mass, well, that's light. And I don't need Einstein to do the math, because last night I had this dream, a heartbreak in history. Stephen King's pen couldn't architect this misery. Same song like Do Re, try not to let it get to me, but so far can't seem to clear the air like antihistamines. And the iron, wait, you didn't get that. Same song like Do Re, try not to let it get to me, but so far it's hard to clear the air like antihistamines. And the irony is my enemies accuse me of their actions like I'm mimicking their energy. Does it stand to reason it's make-believe? If they believe it, maybe they making it up. Maybe they Maybelline it. No, they're not concerned with the truth, like Picasso and blue. So my curtains are drew. Now my left hand pleasure heart heavy as wet sand, where artists get fans repping they red flags. Damn, bang me in the noggin with a gang of problems. Offer ways to solve them, they flip and change the topic. Shit, that's the price you pay for staying honest. A lonely road, and that's the price you pay for staying on it. Yeah, there's an easy pass on my stroll. They say that shit is easy, but it still takes a toll. They say that shit is easy, but it still takes a toll. Hold on. Oh yeah, to say that shit is easy, but it still takes a toll. So I might take a sip or a smoke, burn away the burn, and get this weight off my soul before the last straw. My feelings clash, y'all. Like, should I go or stay rocking the cast bar? I put the pain inside my prose like a glass jar and watch it as it folds in on itself like a collapsed star. I put my pain inside my prose like a glass jar and watch it as it folds in on itself like a collapsed star. The lesson is you get what you settle for. So for every love me not, I just tear another petal off. It's better off we never talk, because helping palms from sketchy arms often have weapons drawn. So now I'm back to writing these sad songs and give me something to cry about like black moms. I try to keep my faith in my guile in this fight, but these life bars be over their head like it's Capcom. All right.
So that was Baxter Wordsworth with an a cappella piece from The Poet Will Be Televised.
What a weirdo.
So there is a line Baxter says a couple times is you shouldn't have to ask a good person.
You shouldn't have to ask people who know right from wrong what side they on.
That's true.
Moving right along.
So I wanted to get some final thoughts around that quote. And not necessarily what side are you on, but like, I don't know how to formulate this question. I also didn't write it down. I was not being a very good host with the question. But how are you bringing your right, moral right, into the world?
Ooh, that's
Moral right.
loaded.
Well,
That's loaded.
try to
Moral.
make it nice and neat. Maybe we'll give like a minute to think about it.
How do I bring my moral right into the world? Yeah, that's
That was the wrong.
no. That was actually the right one. That was definitely the right
This
sound.
is like the Halloween one.
How do you bring your moral right into the world?
Yeah, how are you attempting? Oh, Jade actually wants to say something.
One thing, by example.
By example. Leading by example.
I think that's a tricky, even by example, I think it's tricky because I think, like on a core idealistic level, people have an idea of what's right and wrong, right? But I think throughout our entire life, we make compromises and we make we make compromises for things and we rationalize things depending on like circumstance and kind of our proximity to other things and people, right? So like this like easiest way of understanding this is you in your heart of hearts could believe like homophobia is wrong, right? But then your dad could be homophobic, right? And you don't directly challenge that, you know, because it's your dad, and you're like, there's a part of you that like has come to the compromise that you have this, you can't reconcile like your love for your dad and your respect or whatever for him as an authority in your life, and also this thing that you know in your heart of hearts is wrong. Like I doubt police officers join the police. Well, I doubt all police officers join the police force to be compromised and be like shitty people. You know what I'm saying? They probably think they're going to do the right thing in every situation, and then they find themselves in a situation where they're like, oh man, my partner is fucking breaking the law. What do I do? Like, you know? And it's like, you have your ideals. You know what's right and you know what's wrong, but now you find yourself in these gray areas where like, do you compromise? And I think the more you compromise, I think anything in this world, the more you do, the easier it is to do it. So the more you compromise, the easier it is to compromise.
But don't you think the gray area is the norm? Like I'm thinking about this idea of the
It's
moral
human.
right, and I wonder if there's such a thing. Like I think of myself as someone who's very attached to doing right, and I still say that, or attached to the idea of justice, if you will. I think the world as we are in it now, or as it exists, but especially as society, or going back to what we've been talking about earlier in the podcast, American society is constructed is that like people who are suffering are pitted against each other. The idea of the moral absolute is a farce, and if we can't accept the gray area and that like morality is rife with contradiction, like the example with the family, I think family is a primary place where we can see this stuff play out, because families, particularly the nuclear family under patriarchy and colonialism, is dysfunctional. Love is a gray area. Like going back to the idea of love, I think, the homophobic father question is like, I don't even know if it's a question of because he's the father and he's the authority figure in the family, because I don't know if I believe that's a thing, but like, when people you love believe in things that you don't agree with, believe in things that are violent, these are not, I don't know if there's a moral right there.
Well, there's your moral right? Like there's what you think is right and what's wrong. And that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm not saying like there is an overarching moral right for everyone, but I think like you in your heart have this core that what you believe is like what's right and what's wrong. But to compromise is human too. I'm not saying like, I'm not saying that these compromises are incessantly like or inherently a negative thing, right? But like we do make these compromises, right? But even in the compromise, like you're making a compromise. Like when you're rationalizing things, I feel on a core level.
Sure. Yeah.
Is there? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, and I don't have to say that much more about this. Like, if there is a difference between rationalizing and doing what you have to do for the moment because of the impossibility of a situation.
But I think those are the
Or
same.
the necessity
I think
of
that's
it.
the same thing. I think if you have to rationalize in the moment, you're still doing what you need to do, and you're still rationalizing.
Well, no, because rationalizing, you can actually create something that doesn't exist.
I mean, but even if what if that's what you have to do in the moment? To, like, you know what I'm saying?
But
like,
I
still
think that's the
that's
thing. You might not actually have to. You could construct that.
Yeah, like I feel like we're functioning with examples like police brutality and like your partner is a cop, and not. I don't know if
your rent's
these are
due
pretty.
and you
These
don't
are
have a
these are
job.
examples that we're familiar with. That we
Right.
like know which is the right versus wrong in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there are scenarios that arise where it's not quite so.
Well, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt.
I think personally for me, this question is hard because I think at one point in my life, I definitely was like, oh, there's a moral right. There's something that's definitively right and definitively wrong. And I definitely still struggle with the concept of right and wrong because I do have that kind of in my DNA. But I realize
I got morality in my DNA.
But I realize how that can be flawed, and I think what I try to do is I have certain values that I believe in, and I try to do my best to bring those into the world, but understanding that like those things might not necessarily be the best thing. So I'm constantly questioning certain aspects of it. Obviously, I'm not questioning being nonviolent or being caring, but there might be certain things that I believe in that I have to constantly ask a question like, okay, so I believe in this thing, but does that necessarily mean it's a thing that's good for everyone? Or is that just something that I am close to? And especially because I am in this point in my life in a certain position of power in places that I'm in, I'm constantly asking myself that question because I am tasked with making decisions that directly affect like groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always like, okay, I think this is right, but is this right for me or is this right for everyone? Is this right something that is going to be helpful for multiple people or is it for specific people? And what does that mean? And that's kind of like where I'm kind of at. It's like I
think part of the difficulty for me in approaching moral right too is that it seems really situational. Like there's a lot to everything kind of hinges on the circumstances of the moment when you're sort of made to question how you might feel about a thing or like what you might do or what, a situation. I don't know. I just think that it shifts, and I kind of, to Chaya's point, like my overall focus, I think about most aspects of life, be it creative, professional, whatever, is trying to inhabit the gray area in a way where I can just like kind of sink into the unknowing or the inability to sort of get a clear sense of what a thing might be or might not be. But I do think too that whatever, I think that what this might sound really problematic, but I think that what the moral right should be is being able to make your choices and stand by them. And, if you can, there are so many good things that sometimes have to be achieved by questionable means, and it's like, but based on the circumstances of the situation, can you defend the choices that you made to get there? Like, are you able to think through at a certain level of like, I'm okay with this lines up with, like this is what I was presented with, but I did what I could with what I had at that moment, I don't know. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this word that I contended with a lot around. I wish I could remember what the piece of research or reading that I'm thinking of is. It was around decolonization, and this term incommensurable, or the notion of incommensurability. And when we think about colonization and decolonization and what it means to actually unsettle and resettle lands and what that means about current displacing of peoples in order to put communities back where they are from and lands that they owned or had property is an interesting question, but had some ownership or claim over. Like these are questions with no answers. The moral right strikes me as the ability to sit with the incommensurability versus, I'm not saying that there's nothing we have to do. There is something we have to do, but we don't exactly know what that looks like in terms of what the moral right is.
And I think it's weird to like phrase it as the moral right, because I think it's more of the individual principle of it. I don't want to say right or moral, but like I think everything that you guys are saying, I don't think it's incorrect, and I think it all kind of boils back to like, do you think it's right? Like, because again, I think human beings know when they're doing something that they believe is right and when they're doing something that there's not. Like, because even in all these situations, and even in what you're saying, Mikal, there's still like the underlying principle of like trying to be fair. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's circumstances will be different, and at the end of it, you still want to be fair in whatever your decision
I don't know.
is.
For me, if it's fair, it's more about trying to not do harm. That's where I'm at. It's not about fair for me. It's like I'm trying to do.
So you would do something
The least
unfair.
amount of
You would do something unfair if it didn't. Well, if you did something unfair,
Yeah.
would you define that as doing harm?
Not necessarily.
Interesting.
I can't think of a scenario to specific right now.
For
but-
me, for as an educator, like working in schools, like it happens. Like I mean, this sounds insignificant, but the other day we had a contest in class where my students were building bridges, and
Metaphorically, no.
no, like literal bridges, little bridges with spaghetti and marshmallows. And one student, his team worked really hard on theirs, and another team was like fighting the whole time. They ended up splitting into another team, and then they kind of threw their bridge up, and that's the bridge that won. And the team that like spent so hard, like working on, I stacked a bunch of popsicle sticks on top of it, and the one that collapsed first, like with the least amount of popsicle sticks, is the loser. So the one that was like put together with all these like plans and lovingly, it collapsed at 48 popsicle sticks, and the other one held up, and I put 50 on it and was still like holding up.
Right.
So they won. They won the prize, which was a bag of popcorn. And
So, but
not
wait,
okay.
what
I
was-
mean, I mean that's how they felt, and the other team was very upset with me. But it's like
But
that was fair.
right?
I mean, and
I think
I
you-
guess it was kind of unfair because they put so much work in.
No, the putting the effort in doesn't obtain the results. If you put your effort into something and it falls apart, then the other team didn't fall apart.
But I think the education model is I think we're all educators, right? I think if we're thinking about classrooms and how they're incredibly unfair towards disabled kids with disabilities, to POC kids, to queer kids, trans kids, I don't think that it's necessarily fair if those are the kids that I am going to call on first when I'm asking questions, or if those are the people who I give the majority of my attention to. Like, that might not be equal, but it's equitable. You know what I
But
mean?
it's-
Like, I'm not concerned. Privileged little white kid that is going to have all of who more than likely has socioeconomic resources for him or her to get support elsewhere, or to get encouragement, like when the entire society is built to build that child up, and it tears down these other kids in these ways. Like, I'm going to give them more of my attention, or I'm going to center them in a lesson. Like,
Right, it's like in that
right,
way,
and
like
but that-
fairness is different from what's
right,
just.
right.
Yeah.
But no, but that's you being personally fair. You're looking at the bigger picture. You're like, this is unfair, so I'm going to try to even it out. And in my mind, that's fair.
But then,
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't. But this is where we end up in these sort of debates, or these the systems that we're in, right? Where it's like that does not work for people. Like I heard something recently where this gay. Okay, so this is I like a lot of advice columns. So this woman wrote in, straight woman wrote in, and was very upset that her gay male friend. She was out with him and a bunch of his friends who were all also gay, and they referred to straight people as breeders. And she got so angry and was just like, I cannot believe blah, blah, blah. And
She
perhaps
wrote in about this?
She wrote in
Because
and was
she's-
just like, do I stand up for slurs? And I was just like,
But she's
It's
not
a
looking
slur.
thank you. I was
like
like, I just
you
think,
breed, but she's not looking at the bigger picture. She's
Right.
she's feeling her personal
Right.
anecdotal experience, and she's
Right.
like, this is unfair. But if you look at the macro, it's like, hey, lady, it ain't that unfair.
And it's also deeply unfair that, and if you look at the macro, it's like it's deeply unfair that, people who decide to get married, if you can get married,
Right.
people who decide to have children, the system is set up to benefit you, so, people who live outside of that norm get screwed
It's the
on their taxes. You get screwed on, all of these different things that are not built to recognize
It's
you.
the same people who are mad at
Yeah.
affirmative action. It's like, they think it's unfair because they
Right.
because of affirmative action, but it's
Right.
like affirmative action exists because the system is unfair.
Yeah.
It's like you have to look at the whole thing.
But a lot of people, absolutely. I mean, we could have a whole discussion about
for real.
affirmative action, but I think, a lot of people in the comments on, the host of this advice column is a trans person, so they were like, all right, whatever. But then in the comments, people were just like, fair, that kind of wording came up, fair is fair, speaking ill of people is speaking ill of people, and it's like, oh my God, do we really have to have the discussion about the impact of calling a gay man the F word versus calling straight people breeders? That's
Yeah.
not the same thing.
Right.
No.
But
You
there
know,
but there
that's
is
not.
there is a way of reaching, because like it's like, yes, it's hurtful, and yes, it's like they're being disrespectful, but
It's
they're
really not even that hurtful.
Is it
I mean,
hurtful?
but wait, we cannot. You
It's kind of weird.
no. You can't decide whether it's hurtful for someone else. If they're hurt by it, it's hurtful. Like, you know what I'm saying? But is it?
Sometimes white
but
people
there's
get
no-
hurt by being
but
called white
there's-
people.
That's
It's
but
like-
that there's
no, but no, I hear what you're
But
hear what
now-
you're saying.
but
European.
let me finish saying it.
Okay.
Like, feelings are valid. Like, you know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
yes.
Like, if a woman tells me that she's scared in a situation, whether I believe the danger is there or not, she's scared in the situation. A feeling is valid, right? But but then you have to ask: are these feelings enforced by institutions? Are these feelings like are exaggerated by other circumstances that like surround it and things like that? Like, calling a gay man the F word is supported by like murder and oppression.
What
and
else I was going to say, the reality of it is this: is that there's no consequence to one term.
That's exactly
towards
what
it-
that's
towards
exactly
another.
what I'm saying. Is
So,
like
yeah.
one of them is supported by like actual events that happen and things like that. Like so it's like here's a conundrum. Oftentimes I like, let's say I get on an elevator with a white woman, right, and then like she gets scared and like holds her pocketbook. Like, on one hand I'm deeply upset because I'm like, yo, I'm fucking not a fucking murderer, right? But on the other hand, I'm like, I'm completely like empathetic or sympathetic because I'm like, yo, women get assaulted and murdered at a astounding rate.
But
The
can I-
number one
but you know
cause for
what?
death in women
This is
is
great.
men.
But can I be
But
honest?
it's usually their partner.
But you know what? Can I be honest
Right.
with you? So this might get me in trouble. I'm frequently, there's recordings of me getting in trouble with my job. So I'll say this: if a woman of color or a queer person is afraid of my maleness, I am more sensitive to that than if it's a white woman. And the reason why is because the over exaggeration of what I am to being aggressive
Right.
or whatever have you, I can just literally like lower the decimal of tone of my voice, and I instantly become aggressively violent
without a
to
shadow of a
white
doubt.
women.
But there's still
I'm not as sensitive to their fear as I am to others in terms of
But
my
that's
actual maleness.
but isn't that-
because their existence actually is more dangerous to me
Yes,
than the
it
other
is.
way around?
You think the existence of the white woman is more dangerous to you than
Yeah, and,
Yes.
the pedestal that white women have been
Absolutely.
put on over the years.
I think white. I
Since
think
the
I
relation
think
to black
I
men.
think
Yeah,
I think
in
whiteness
relation to black men,
in-
yeah.
Black people.
I actually think whiteness trumps everything. I think whiteness
Mm-hmm.
trumps gender. I think whiteness trumps
I
orientation.
that-
don't,
that-
I
That's
don't
why white
believe
women
in
voted
gender,
but white
yeah,
but
whiteness
white
does
women
trump it.
voted
Yeah.
Trump in. Like,
Without a shadow of
they
a doubt.
have
We
clung
gotta stop
to
using
that
Trump.
thinking
No
ship of
wordplay.
whiteness
Yeah.
more than
Whiteness
they
trumps.
like.
Right.
There's
But
so
white women
many.
shot themselves in the foot because gender does not. Well, whiteness
and they're
does not
learning.
trump gender.
Well, and
yeah.
they're learning
Yeah.
this, and I
wait,
think a
gender
lot
does
of
not
it-
trump what?
And I'm not making this. This is historical
Whiteness
fact. Like we
does
can
not trump
look
gender.
at statistics about this. Like it's historically speaking, a whiteness and vis-a-vis white women basically taking the power or utilizing the power of white maleness is actually more dangerous and detrimental to black people in general
Right.
than it
What
is
else?
the other way around.
Absolutely.
And that's so a white woman being scared of me, I have more to be scared of from a white woman or a white
In an
person.
elevator?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if she calls the cops, it's his
Absolutely.
Yeah.
ass. It's his ass.
And
No
they're-
matter-
they're
no-
not-
no matter
they're
what
gonna arrest
happens.
him first before
No
they
matter
look
what
at
happens.
the tape of the elevator.
No matter what happens.
All a
They're
white
gonna
woman
blame
has
him.
to do is say, "I was scared. He was threatening me." She cries. He's either
Yeah.
dead or in jail.
I have
Yeah.
personally experienced at my workplace literally white people, white women going in hysterics and nothing happening, and the minute my voice goes from a 5 to a 7, there's like a concern in the room. So it's a constant like checking of eggshells that I have to actually be on when all I'm simply doing is just trying to get my point across. Like we've all
there-
been go ahead.
So are there black women as well in your work?
Well,
Yeah.
now they're squad up. Now it's crazy. Now it's just black women all day. So
Okay.
it's
And do-
which is very interesting
Question-
too, right? Because like we've been
But
raising
all
Question, do they-
kinfolk ain't kinfolk. There's always
that is absolutely true.
But wait, I just
Ask-
just
ask
for
Ask
do the black women have the same kind of like obstacles to navigate as you? Like, do they get kind of like checked on their energy and conversation? I know just for perspective on.
To be honest with you, it's relatively new, and I don't want to speak for them. We'd probably have to ask them.
Well, in your perspective of it.
My personal observation is that they all don't have the same type of temperament. So two of them are definitely a lot more subdued than others. There's one manager that's very similar to me. Like, I'm just a very excitable person. Like, you've been around me, Jahan. You know, like I just naturally I can be energetic. I can get loud when I want to, but it's perceived differently. So like I think I think that particular manager may, but I don't want to speak for that because I don't really know.
No,
I don't want to know
understand.
how she feels about it.
Yeah. What the?
I don't know what that was.
Oh, okay. Ghost to the machine.
Well, that's creepy.
But I definitely do know and have personally experienced at work this immediate like silencing due to like a sort of like recoiling when it's perceived that I might be aggressive.
Question: does this happen to other black men that you work with as well?
There are.
That's another problem.
No, it's a black man in
Are you the
education.
only black man
in my
In management,
department?
yeah.
In management, absolutely.
That's crazy.
No, it's not crazy. It's actually statistically.
It's statistically
That's.
I mean,
normal.
it's still.
It's
It could be
actually normal.
statistically
And that's
and normal. It's still crazy.
And that's what's
Right.
well, right, and that's something that I have not figured out a way to write about this. I should write about this, but like it's something that's been in my career. Like I have always been like
Man, I'm the
definitely
only-
been around other black women, other black people.
I'm the
but,
only
like,
black person in
being
the
a,
company
like,
I work
cis black male
In the
in
whole company?
education.
And there's more than one
I'm
shop?
always
I think so.
by myself. I've always been by myself.
It didn't used to be that way, but the other
Yeah.
people left.
And the funny thing is the predecessor before me was the same. So my predecessor, Dr. Foster, was he was the sole black male.
Did he also find himself?
We've had many conversations.
Interesting.
we
And
are
he's-
homies.
He's not excitable.
He's
very chill.
He's super, and he relayed certain things
Yeah.
to me.
Right.
It was, and it's what's funny about it is that when I took the position, I immediately sought. I mean, we had mutual people in common, but I immediately sought him out. And over the first like 6 to 8 months, and I've been there for 4 years
And
now.
it's crazy 'cause,
and
like,
I
you
was
work-
relaying things to him, and he was like, "Yep."
Do you find
Be prepared for this. Know this. Do this. Do this. Do this.
this is weird because it's becoming like an interview?
Yeah.
But do you find like because you work in a predominantly artistic space, right?
And a
Yeah.
predominantly white space. And
Right,
A
no, no.
predominantly elite white space.
So that's my question. Do you find it to be like less artistic and more sort of like, I guess, bureaucratic or more kind of? Do you like when you navigate? Do you feel like an artist still confined to navigating these like white kind of like do you have to code switch and whatnot? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or
Well, McCown doesn't code switch.
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Totally.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
I thought you were like against it. I'm not gonna code switch.
I don't even know if
So here.
if we know we do.
No.
if we know when we do
Look,
it.
here's the reality. I always bring myself into things, but in order to speak at certain levels, I have to actually so that I am understood. I can't be like yo, or whatever. You know, I'm making up a thing. I don't actually say yo all the time, but I'm not. I have to understand certain language and speak in certain language to get certain things across to the divisions that I'm in.
I also sometimes feel like code switching can, like, take different forms.
Yeah,
It's like
sure.
Definitely.
So there's code switching that's
Yeah.
actually like in how we speak and present. And then I was with a friend and we had dinner sometime last week and I took like 35 minutes at the bathroom because I ran into some dude I had gone to college with.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I relayed the conversation to her, because like some awkward thing happened around his wife, like both of them were white, saying something about how like my skin was glowing and it just like people,
Oh,
people
you're
looking
so
old.
brown
Yeah.
person.
I like made some comment about how I can only have one drink now, and she's like, "Oh, that must be why you like look the way you look." Because I guess like white people from college now look 100.
No, it's melanin. It's called melanin.
But I basically said something back, and then like sort of put my foot in my mouth, but in a way that only made me. I don't know. It was awkward. And then I told my friend about it, and she was like, "This is why white people like you so much." She's like, "You're just like going around making yourself smaller, like right and left for them." Like the thing you said back, like was kind of like really accommodating their discomfort with whatever it is that I brought to their table, literally in this restaurant. And I was thinking about how like that's a form of code switching and not knowing you're doing it.
Yeah.
Being deprecating. Yeah.
But is that something you do in the presence of whiteness, or that's something you do in the presence of like people? Like,
I probably do it in the presence of what I perceive to be some kind of power.
Okay, yeah, right.
Maybe not. I don't
Factual.
think it's always whiteness, but I think, I
Sure.
think I do it to accommodate others when.
Right.
And I'm sure it's
I think
not
I should.
conscious.
I don't know.
You know,
Notoriously,
we're
you
kind
are
of-
a joy to be
We've
around.
kind of run out of time, guys. So since we were talking a little bit about power, how about we end on a note of power? Just like one word, one empowering word from each person at the table.
One
That's just-
empowering
yeah,
word.
one empowering word. And for example, believe.
Strive.
Play.
B.
Dope.
Jay, do you have one? Do? Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank y'all for listening. This
Shout
has
out
been
to
the
Yoda.
Poet Podcast.
Yeah.
We'll see you at the Poet Will Be Televised.